Welcome, everyone. Creating and connecting with other artists creates healing. Whether you are young or old, a seasoned artist, or just curious, we're so glad that you've joined us today to explore art together. Christine Knox, a seasoned illustrator, quilter, artist, and Mito champion, will teach us how to use various drawing materials, techniques, and help us dive into our first art project together. This session is called Snowdrop and Ladybird. One of the things that I love most about art is the freedom you experience as you create, and today we get to do this together. So please come as you are with the materials that you have. Join us in any way that is most meaningful to you. For some, you may prefer just to watch the first session and get back on later and follow along. For others, we hope that you'll start this project today, but if you need to take a break, it's okay. This session is recorded and you can go back and look at it later on. If you have a question for Christine, you can either unmute yourself and ask it, or if you prefer, you can put it in the chat and I'll ask Christine. And if you stay to the end of the session, we will end with an open Q&A time. Know that during this space, you're welcome to use the chat as a way to connect with other artists as you're drawing and exploring this time together. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Christine Knox. Christine was born in Alberta, but was raised primarily in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Nature has always been a huge part of her life, spending many hours either in the rainforest or at the beach. Her creativity began with spending hours coloring in coloring books, filling every page very carefully. Then she moved to real drawing at about 10 years old. These early drawings were centered around her surroundings and family. Pencils and pencil crowns were the first tools she learned to draw with, so it's not surprising that they've become her preferred medium. Her favorite subjects to draw are animals and nature. For most of her adult life, she had to concentrate on a regular income, so she trained as a floral designer and eventually opened her own floral design studio. When she became ill with Mito at the age of 51, she had to close her business. She felt a deep sense of loss and purpose, but when she turned to her art, that sense of purpose came back and allowed her to be creative in other ways. She's begun taking commissions for pet portraits with colored pencil and started painting with acrylics again. And this has given her a flexible work schedule, which we all know is definitely helpful with Mito. So thank you so much, Christine, for coming on today, for teaching us, but even more sharing yourself with us and this important part of yourself.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. That was a wonderful introduction. And welcome all of you. I'm really thrilled that you decided to join us today. And please feel free to ask questions, as Stephanie said, to participate in the way that you need to. If you need to stop and go rest or have something to eat or drink, feel free to do that. You can come back and watch the recording later, so you won't have missed anything. And just enjoy, and don't start off going, oh, this is crappy, I don't like how this is going. Just go with the process, and don't let yourself get into that negative headspace, because as artists, I think we often do that. We go, oh, this is yucky, I don't like this, it's not turning out the way I expected. That's fine, just go with it. If yours doesn't look exactly like mine at the end, it doesn't matter. That's the wonderful thing about art. We all approach it in our own unique way, and actually I love it when other people's work is different from mine, because it shows who they are. So let's just start, and we'll see where we all end up, and it'll be exciting. And at the end, I'd love if everybody held up their drawing in front of the camera so we can all see what everyone's done, and really celebrate that. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So I'm going to switch over to my other camera, which has my drawing table. So we're just going to move over to that. So Stephanie, I assume you're spotlighting the drawing one.
Yep, it's taking just a minute for the drawing one to come up.
Okay, and I don't know what's wrong with my... having some issues with Zoom here for some reason. Just give me one sec here. So when you think you have everything all worked out, something goes wrong.
I know. We had it all prepped and ready, but then technology is going to do what technology is going to do.
Okay, let's see.
There it is.
Is it there now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what we're going to do to start with is we're going to be taking the line drawing that I supplied everyone with, and we're going to be, now it's disappeared from my screen. What the heck is going on here?
We can see it though, Christine.
Are
It
you
looks
okay?
Yeah, it looks good on our end.
Yeah, as long as you can see it. So I have here the image that we're working with for the Snowdrop and Ladybird. And then I have my piece of pastel mat. If you weren't able to get pastel mat, you're using some other surface, it's totally fine. We are just playing here. It's not like we don't have to be super, worried about what we're using or not using today. But if you'd like to learn more about any of the products that I'm using, I'm most happy to share with you about that. So I'm using some graphite paper or carbon paper, as we often refer to it, putting that over my work surface, and then the line drawing on top of that. So I want to make sure that the line drawing is kind of centered on the piece of pastel mat that I want to transfer it to. Then I just take the regular pencil and I just begin marking the lines. Now, before I go too far, I always like to just check and make sure it's coming through the way I need it to. You don't have to press hard, and as a matter of fact, it's better if you don't. So we just go over each of the lines really quickly and easily. And don't worry if you don't quite follow the line exactly. It's not going to be a do or die sort of situation. You can just change it a little bit when you're actually drawing with the pencil crayons. So just go with whatever shows up right now, and we'll resolve any issues that come up as we go. A very quick process for this small of a drawing. It's not too labor intensive to do this part. So make sure I captured everything. Looks like I did. Okay, so that's how quick and easy it is to transfer a line drawing. Does anybody have any questions about that?
What, Christine, makes it transfer? Like, what is on the back of that pastel mat that allows you to have that drawing that you just traced?
Let me just show you. So this is carbon paper. And so, or sometimes it's called graphite paper if you go to the art store. And basically this is carbon that's been put on this back of this paper. And so when you draw over it, I don't know if you can see that there's all different little lines where I've done line drawings previously. And so when you press on it, those lines transfer. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And how much can you use that one sheet of paper? How long will that last you?
I've been using this one for probably about 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it lasts you quite a bit of time. It might be worth an investment.
Last a long time. Okay, so now that we've got the drawing on here, we don't want it to be quite as intense as it is, because if we leave it too intense, what will happen is that will bleed through the pencil crayons, and maybe not give the effect that we want. So what I do is I just take a kneadable eraser and just go over the drawing, not hard, but firm. And we're just taking down those lines and softening them. We'll be able to see them, but just not as strongly. There. Can you see the difference that made? So then we're going to start working on the drawing. And I usually like to start with the lightest areas first. So in this case, of course, it's going to be our snowdrop. And I just realized I didn't bring over my white. So we're dealing with I've got on my surface is a light gray pastel mat. You might be working on a white piece of paper or something lighter than what I have. So my drawing will show up a little quicker potentially than what yours will, where I'm working white against gray, but it's still going to be very, very subtle initially. So if you're not really seeing what I'm doing for that reason, just bear with me as the layers go on, you'll be able to see it better and better. So what we're going to do is, if you look at the reference photo, you can see here that there's like quite strong white areas. So along here, in the center here, here, and in this area, and a little bit over here and on the leaves. So what we're going to do first is use those light areas and delineate those on the drawing. So I'm just doing little lines, almost, but it's almost more of a circular motion. And that helps to fill the pigment into the drawing surface. So we're just going to hit it in those areas where the light is shining on the flower the most.
Christine, we've had a couple questions come in. One is they were asking what eraser, they asked, what does your eraser look like? So I assume they want to know maybe a bit what the type is.
So normally I'll hold this up. So this is a kneadable eraser, and you'll see I can shape it. They normally come as little rectangular gray erasers. Just looking to see if I had a new one here to show you what they look like, but I don't see one right handy. So yeah, they can shape, so you can point it, and then if you needed to erase, you've got a fine point. So this one is a Faber-Castell kneadable eraser. If you look it up online, you'll easily find it. It's not hard to find them.
And then Allie has a question. Allie, did you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah. Is it possible to have I'm not able to see the pins drawing.
The which?
Like I know it's pinned, but it's not pinned for me.
Oh, got ya.
Are you on your phone?
Yeah. And it was pinned earlier.
It is pinned, it's spotlighted now.
It was working earlier.
Okay. It might be that it's because it's a dual spotlight. Does this help?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens is occasionally I'm gonna show like both her and the drawing just so people kind of have that frame.
Okay.
So, but I'll make sure that I'll go in and out because it's most important that you can see her drawing, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll keep it like this primarily.
Okay, and I don't have a kneaded eraser, so I'm having a really hard time erasing and still seeing what I'm erasing. I'm not sure if there's a way to fix that.
You can just leave the drawing as it is, if you like. It makes a little bit more when you're completed your drawing, so maybe you won't be as happy with the end result. But, but you know, you can always try again once you do have a kneadable eraser. The pink erasers that we, commonly used in school, they will work, but it is possible sometimes that they'll leave a little bit of marking on your surface. So it's just something to be aware of. You want to go really softly and carefully when you're trying to, diminish the drawing a little bit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I can look for a different eraser.
Sure, yeah, try making a mark somewhere and then erasing it and seeing what happens, like if it leaves some sort of a mark that you don't want, or if it just takes off what you do want.
I have one of the white erasers.
Yeah, a white eraser should work as well. Yeah.
Okay. And then can you go over again what you're doing in white? Because I'm also having a really hard time seeing that.
Sure, yeah. So in the reference photo, if you look at it, there's a number of really bright white areas. So we've just gone through those bright white areas and touched those locations with the white, and just in little circular motions is how I do it. And we're going to be doing multiple layers, so it's not like this is the only layer that's going to go on there. There's going to be multiple layers. Okay, so that was the polychromos white that I used. And now we're going to go into the cold gray 2 is what it's called in the polychromos as well. If you don't have the same pencils that I have, don't worry at all. Just go with, something approximating what was suggested in the materials list. And if you're able to, say, have like 3 shades of gray or 3 shades of red, 3 shades of green, that's totally going to work. Even if you don't have 3, if you have 2, you just need to have some contrast. So just let me know if you're running into any issues with your pencils or anything like that. So we're just basically going to be filling in kind of all of the different areas with one layer of pigment to begin with. And then we'll further refine it as we go. So just wherever you see sort of a light shade of a grayish white, that's what we're sort of trying to capture, and just fill in each of those areas. And I thought that it might be interesting for all of you to sort of understand a little bit about colored pencils. So there's quite a difference in varying brands of colored pencils. And what that difference primarily is the makeup of the pencil is what creates it to be color fast. So color fast is essentially that if the pencil drawing is exposed to light, which it's going to be, it will each of the colors will have a different degree of light fastness. So exposure to light will, with some colors, make them fade faster, and other colors will fade in less time. So you'll get varying qualities of pencil crayons. And so like there's going to be a sort of a student grade, and then there's going to be more of the artist grade. So that's what polychromos is. It's a very high quality artist grade pencil. They were manufactured in, I believe it was Germany originally. And I really love them. I've got other pencil brands as well, but these ones are the ones I use the most.
So do you feel like that the polychromos blends better than the other like student grade pencils? And someone
Yeah.
also just asked, or Allie asked, that she has cool gray 20% and 30%. Is there one that you should start off with? Because I know you mentioned that you're going to be layering.
Right, so I would start with the lightest one, the cool gray 20%. And so the one I'm going to actually be using right now is a warm gray 3. But if she stays with the cool grays initially, that's fine. I wanted to put a little bit of the cool gray just for this area right here. You can see that it's a slightly brownier kind of gray. So I just wanted to add some right in there. So it's not, there's not going to be a lot of sort of obvious differences initially as we're drawing. It'll start to look much more clear as we go along.
So do you think that the polychromos blends better than the student grade pencils?
Yeah, and they also are much more light fast as well. So that's the big thing with them is you get a much higher quality result, and the pigments are, I guess what I would say is the pigments are a little more refined. They're brighter, they're more intense. Yeah, just a way higher quality. And you can get much better results with them than you could using just a student grade pencil crayon. But that said, you know, if you're not going to draw a lot, why spend, you know, a ton of money on something that you're never going to use again or not very often? So, you know, start out with a student grade and then go from there. So now I'm going to be switching to the warm gray 1, and it's going to help blend some of those areas together where I've done darker, the warm gray 3 and the warm gray, or the white, pardon me. So I'm just going to soften all of that up a little bit by using this almost as a blending pencil as opposed to just giving me color. So I can soften, excuse me, soften between the different areas and really sort of have those layers start to meld together.
And so all of this time you're still working in circle
Yes.
format.
Yeah. The odd time I will switch to a bit of a line, like here, I'll just show you right now, is if I'm finding I'm working in a small area, I can switch to doing small little lines, and that will also work. But I find when I'm just initially putting down color, I want to start with doing those little circular motions. Now I'm going to go back to the white again and sort of establish some of those brighter areas by adding that next layer. And again, that helps to combine all the different layers that we've been adding gradually here.
And so your paper, I notice, is it gray? It looks gray on the computer.
It is gray. And so I chose gray specifically to allow everyone to see the colors in the Snowdrop a little bit better. We could have gone with white paper, and then what would happen is that it just wouldn't be as visible initially. So I figured going with the gray was probably a better choice to allow everyone to see. So now I'm going to move to a dark sepia. So where I want to put the dark sepia is, you can see that there's a little bit of darker area right here, right over here, and here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that in on the tip as well of this. And this is where you use a very soft hand. So I'm going to show you actually, when I'm drawing, I'm like barely touching my skin. And it's like, it's hardly even moving my skin at all. Whereas a hard pressure could look more like this. But I'm doing a very soft pressure, like hardly any at all. I'm just capturing this little fold in the petal that's kind of behind the other petal. And a little bit here as well. And then there's a darker line along the edge of this petal. I'm going to capture that with a little bit of the dark sepia. And then a little bit for this one.
So Christine, we're getting some feedback. If you could slow down just a little bit, I think people are trying to kind of keep up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fast speed. So yeah, thank you for letting me know that I'm going a little too quickly.
Yeah, but maybe while they're catching up, maybe there's some things you can describe about what you did, like with the petal and outlining it. I think it's helpful if people that are tuning in, I think it's helpful when you're able to see this on a computer versus your phone, because it's hard to zoom in much more to the actual picture, just because of the it'll get more blurry as it gets closer. So just try to keep that in mind a little bit, but and then it moves, so it will go blurry a little bit in and out, but as she adds more color, it'll also become brighter, so you'll be able to see it. And for those that are participating in the chat, just know that I will be putting things in all caps so we can help our friends who are visually impaired to see what's going on in the chat better. I'm not trying to scream at anyone because I know that all caps can look like it's screaming. So I just wanted to add that.
So just while you're catching up, if you're having, if you're not clear about what a stage was or what I did where, please just ask the question. And while you're catching up, I'm going to actually show you quickly kind of what my initial sample drawing was. So this was the initial sample drawing. Is that in the field to be seen?
Yes, that's wonderful.
So that was the first drawing that I did. And then we did a test run with the Mito champions. And so this was the second drawing that I did. And you can see how different each one is. Even though it was me doing it, each one turned out quite different from the other if you really look at some of the small details of it. So, nothing that you do is going to be wrong. It's going to be your interpretation, and that's fabulous. So don't feel that it has to look like mine or anyone else's. It's totally your own work. So I'm going to go back to the drawing, but if you need any sort of guidance, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions or confusions about what I've done. So I think we've got quite a few layers here on the flowers, but what I'd like to start doing is adding a little bit of green here and there. You'll notice that right in this area, there's a touch of green. So I want to bring that in and capture that. So we're just going to put a little spot of green, and I've used permanent green, and then this one is earth green. And then I'm also going to put over a little bit of yellow, just because that is a fairly yellowy green color. So that putting in a layer of the yellow over top, and then going back in with the bright green again, will give that effect. And then just see.
Allie has one more question as you're adding in. It looks like you're starting to add in white. Allie, what's your question?
I'm sorry, where was the dark gray and I think it's a brownish color, I don't remember.
The dark sepia?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I put the dark sepia, I've just got that back in my hand right now. So the dark sepia went here, and then I did a little bit along the edge of the one petal here. And then a little bit on this one as well. So
Okay, I just realized I forgot that color. What is a similar color?
I'm just trying to think which one would be a good one. If you went with, what's another dark sepia? If you went with something that's a brownie gray,
I
like,
have a dark umber.
yeah, you could use dark umber. I would go very, very gently with it though, because,
Okay.
yeah, it might be a little bit too strong of a contrast, but yeah, start with that and see how that goes for you.
And where was the darker gray?
Just in any of those darker sides of the petal. So anything to the left, because the sun is coming this direction. And
Thank
so
you.
anything to the left side of the petal is going to give you the shading that you need. And so if the other thing that I find, like sometimes if you do a line that looks too strong, you can go over top of it with white and just sort of calm it down a little bit. And that's what the white is really good for, blending the colors and softening all of the layers that you've added. So don't be afraid to go back in with your white over top of everything and just sort of soften it up. How's everyone doing? Doing okay? I'm going to take the silence as a yes.
Yeah, I think people are doing great. In the chat, we're talking a little bit about carbon paper and graphite paper again, and just how you utilize that in the beginning of the presentation. So, I think for some of us, I don't know that we've ever seen that before, where you can just have your original piece of paper and then you layer on top of it the carbon paper, and then you put the drawing, and when you trace the drawing, you get the print on the other side. It kind of reminds me of how back in the olden days when you wrote checks and they
Right.
had the carbon paper on the other side so you could remember who you sent the check to or wrote the check to.
Now, another little trick, if you don't happen to have carbon paper, is you can take just an HB pencil, just a regular pencil, and you can scribble on the back of a piece of paper. Doesn't matter what paper it is, just scribble on it and do lots and lots of lines everywhere. And then that becomes your carbon paper. You flip it over, and that's the surface that you're going to use to transfer your marks with.
Nice, that's great. I love the improvisation.
So it's nice to have
Improvising.
a little bit of a cheater way of doing it. You know, if you don't happen to have a piece of carbon paper, there's still a way to make it happen. And this way you don't have to spend as much time doing the drawing part. You can just go right into creating the artwork. And so you can do that with anything.
Oh, that's lovely.
Okay. So we're going to start working on more of the green, which will help delineate the flower a little bit more. So you'll notice that along the stems, it's actually quite kind of a gray green. So I'm going to start with the earth green and just go along the stem, just very softly at first. And there's this little area of yellow green more so we're going to avoid that. And we're going to go over here as well, where there's sort of the gray green. I'm going to fill in that area as well. This is where I tend to use a bit more of the lines, because it's such a fine area that you could never, you know, kind of do a whole pile of little circles, like be going really intensely doing little circles. So sometimes you do change your, I call them mark making. You change your mark making style a little bit to adapt to whatever the area is that you're working on. Now I'm going to go up here and just put in this stem coming up.
And what
to-
is the color that you're using again right now?
It is earth green.
Lovely.
So there wasn't much of the earth green that we needed to use, so just in those few areas. Now we're going to go to the permanent green. So again, very, very softly, very little pressure. And this will help to give the white that we put in, you know, starting to give it a little bit more detail and contrast between the different shapes. The one thing when I'm drawing, I don't necessarily think about, oh, this is a stem or this is a bird or whatever. I'll look at the actual shape that I'm drawing, as opposed to thinking about, you know, this is a whatever. And so I just look very, very carefully at what the shape is. Is it rounded right here? Is it, what color is it? What is it? What is its relationship to other things, you know? So then that way you can not get so caught up in all of the little details of it. You're just working on one little spot at a time. So now I'm going to switch to the permanent green olive and just add a little bit more of a layer on the dark sides of all of the green areas. It's just kind of almost going back over a lot of the other green that we've established, and it just is going to give more depth and contrast, having another layer of color on top of the other areas.
So do you switch like your texture as well? Like, because I know you were working in circles before. At some point, do you switch to more lines as you're
Yeah,
like texturing over, or?
yeah, with this it's more lines because the areas are so small. So I don't have the same space, if you will, to be able to do the amount of circles that would be required. So I just like this is a little bit bigger of an area, so I can do some circles there. But then when I want to fade it out, I'm going to be doing more sort of back and forth lines. And so I'm going to be using the yellow here. I forgot to tell you that I'd switched colors. And it is a dark cadmium yellow. And what that will help to do is to really brighten up the greens, make them a little more vibrant and intense, and kind of give that very fresh spring green color that is in the image. And then we'll go back over that again with some of the brighter green, which is the permanent green. So it's a lot of layering to get the effects that you want. So you always want to pay really close attention to your reference photo as you're drawing. And you don't necessarily have to look at what I'm doing so much as keep referring to your reference photo. Look for the details that jump out to you, like how you see it might be different from how I see it. We all, pardon me, we all notice different things. And that's why we can, as artists, we can generate, we can look at something that's exactly the same and each person will see it in a totally different way. And that's what's exciting to me about artwork, is that everyone's going to perceive it in that different way. And that will come across in their artwork, that's their interpretation of it. And there's no wrong way, there's no right way, it's just how you as an artist perceive it. So I'm going to go back in with some white as a way of blending everything that I've just established. So you'll see that putting white on top of this green is taking out some of the graininess a little bit. So so the white makes a good blending tool. There are different blenders that you can get. So let me just show you what a blender looks like. So this is a blender by Derwent, another manufacturer out of England. So I can take the Derwent pencil and I can blend out as well. That's another way of doing it.
What does the blender do versus the white that you put on top? Like, what's the preference of using one over the other?
I mean, they essentially do the same thing, but by using the blender, you're not adding more pigment, you're just spreading the pigment that you have already on the paper. I use both methods, and it's really just a matter of how the pigment is laying down, whether I like the way it's laying down or not. In this case, I just decided it was going to give it a little bit more of a softer effect without taking away some of the pigment colors. I thought by using the blender, it would just allow the colors that I have to spread without adding or without softening them down with white. So that's why sometimes I will use a colored pencil as the blender, and sometimes I go to the blending pencil. Like, I'm going to go back to the white for blending again. And the reason I want to do that is I want to also add a little bit more white pigment along the edges where there's a little bit more of the light shining on top of the surface. So like, if you'll notice along the edge of the stem here, there's a little bit of white showing up. So I want to try to capture that by just using the edge of the pencil, the point of the pencil, and really sort of adding a bit more pigment in there to allow for that reflection to show through. And it also helps to sort of just blend everything together by doing that too. How's everyone doing in terms of, like, are you feeling like you are keeping up with where we're at? Because I would like to start working on the Ladybird, but I don't want to jump ahead if you're still sort of catching up with the Snowdrop.
I think they still might be working. Feel free to let me know where you guys are at in the chat. I know they're having a little bit of a hard time. I wish there was a way to change the contrast, because our friends are some of our friends are visually impaired. So I wish there was a way to like intensify the contrast. But I really applaud you guys for sticking with it and continuing to learn and ask questions through the chat. You're doing an amazing job.
Well, maybe what I can do for our next project is think about something that has a higher contrast, because grays and whites on top of gray are going to be hard to see. So yeah, next time I'll pick something with a higher contrast, and that should help with that as well. the other thing is what everyone needs to sort of think about is that this is a very small drawing. It's like 4 by 6. If you go with something bigger, it's going to be easier for you to create more contrast because you're working on a larger surface. So if you find being visually impaired, you need to work on a bigger piece just to allow yourself to be able to see all of the different details and things. That's totally fine. Like, don't feel you have to work in the size that I'm working in. It's you adapt to whatever your needs are. Does that make sense?
That makes a
Makes
lot of
sense.
sense.
Great.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out too, because sometimes, you know, we get fixated on having to be able to do it just like another person is doing it. But even I was talking with Matt earlier this week, you know, about Monet and how Monet's work changed like in his lifetime as his vision started changing, and the bridge that, you know, went over that classic lily pond, you know, started off in blues and greens, but as his cataracts developed, it turned into reds and oranges. And it's not that it was on fire, but that's what he could see and that's what he could work with. And both paintings are absolutely beautiful and amazing in their differences.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like my work has changed over the years, partly because of how Mito has affected me. Like, I struggle with my eyes as well. I get eye fatigue. And then I also, you'll see that I've got a pretty good tremor. I didn't used to have a tremor. And so since that started and it's gotten progressively worse, I find that one of the things that I really need to focus on is making sure my hand is supported. And if I'm having a really bad day with my tremor, because if my pain level is high, then I find that my tremor is worse. And so you really have to sort of do art when you're physically able. I don't pressure myself to do art necessarily every single day. I'd love to, but some days I'm just not up for it. And so I'd rather wait for a day where I actually feel physically capable of spending the time and the energy to do it. And you just enjoy the process a whole lot more if you're not fighting your body at the same time. So I realized there was one other thing that I wanted to add in some of the green areas, and that's dark sepia. And so the reason I want to add in a bit of dark sepia is it will give a bit of contrast between some of the details. So like underneath these leaves that are curling up, you'll see that there's a bit of a darker area right there. So I'm capturing that just by adding a little bit of that dark sepia. And then also here, there's sort of a notch in the stem. So I'm just going to add a bit of dark sepia there just to give a little bit higher contrast between those areas. And this is where you can really sort of start to add detail, is as you start to refine everything, you can see, oh, well, there's not a lot of distinction between one area to another. So this is where you can start to play with, oh, well, I need a little bit more contrast here. Let's add a little bit more of a darker tone. And you keep playing with it until you're satisfied. It doesn't, like I said to you, it's going to look different from mine. It's going to look different from everybody that's here. And that's totally fine and actually preferred. Because it's your art. It's not my art, it's your art. And so we want you to feel good about what you've accomplished, and whether it looks like mine is not the point.
I really like how you shared, Christine, about the symptom of shakiness that you're having and how you've had to adapt to that. Because I think sometimes, I mean, as artists, we have to accept change in lots of different kinds of ways, and yet, like, it's hard when you've been used to being able to do your art in a particular kind of way, and then a change is like thrown at you. And having grace with yourself in the moment to be like, okay, maybe today isn't an art day, but then how do I spend my creative self that day or experience that day?
So one thing I do is I've always had lots of creative outlets. So some days when I'm not able because my tremor is too bad or my pain is too bad or fatigue or whatever the symptoms are of that day, is I will then turn to doing some other form of creativity, exercise or whatever. So sometimes I'll knit, sometimes I'll quilt, sometimes I go for a walk if I can. You know, you do whatever your needs are. I think it's really important as people with Mito is that we have to know in ourselves what we need. And you know, so if we're having a really bad fatigue day or a crash day, we just kind of have to go with that and go, okay, well, today's not an art day, today is a rest day. And that's good. That's how it is. And you know, be kind to ourselves. Like, you know, don't be criticizing ourselves for the fact we have to rest. We get enough pressure from other folks in our lives sometimes. Well, why aren't you doing this? Why can't you do that? You know, and we just need to be gentle with ourselves and accepting of where we're at. And sometimes it's hard. I'm not saying it's been easy for me either, but yeah, I've just been working on trying to be gentle with myself and be understanding of my limitations. So we're going to start working on the background. If you're not there, it's quite all right. You'll have an opportunity to keep working on what you're doing. And so the reason I wanted to do a background with this particular drawing is I wanted you to be able to see another technique. Oh, actually, I lied. I realized we haven't done the ladybug yet. So we're going to do that first. So you'll notice with the ladybug, it's got this really bright reflection right here. So we're going to first put in a little bit of white so that we retain that brightness right in that spot. And then we're going to get some pencils out of my hands. I end up with pencils in my hand and I end up with this whole fistful of them after a while because I'm switching colors so frequently. So we're going to start off with the lightest red. This one is, I'm just trying to remember, it's 192 is the number, or sorry, pardon me, 121. I don't remember what it's called, but it's quite a, like almost an orangey red. So we're just going to go kind of alongside where those reflections are of the light. And we're just going to sketch in the shape of the ladybug first, just so that because it's so small, we want to make sure that we don't, go crazy and go way outside of where the ladybug actually is. And you'll notice I've gone back to doing the little circles again through here, because it's a small area, but it's big enough to allow me to go with the little circles. I want to get enough pigment down that it is a fairly solid red. Then I'm going to go with my next darker red, which is 126 is the color. It's a little bit more of an intense red. And again, just doing another layer over the whole thing. Okay, now I'm going to go with my darkest red, which is 192. And again, I apologize for not knowing the names of these particular colors. And so this color is going to be giving us the shading for the dark side of the ladybug. So mostly on the left side and a little bit onto the bottom area of the ladybug. Giving them a nice fur, you should say. Although I don't know how you tell the sex apart between ladybugs, so I have no idea if this is actually a male or a female. So that just gives you that nice rounded shape of the ladybug's bottom. And now I'm going to go back in, pardon me, with some dark sepia, because you'll notice at the base of the, excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. Have a little sip of tea. Okay, so you'll notice that there's just a little bit of darkness at his bottom. And so I'm just going to use the dark sepia to give a little bit of that shading. Not a lot, just a little tiny bit. Okay, that's good, I think. And I forgot to grab my black out, so I'm just rip through and find my black. Oh, that's starting to go. There we go. Okay, so I've got some black here. I'm gonna make some noise because I need to sharpen it because we're doing very delicately spot. It's my lovely electric sharpener. I just adore it. Okay, so now we're going to be adding in the spots. So just wherever you see a spot, you just want to just go in little little circles till enough pigment is laid down. You can also add a bit more onto the bottom of the ladybug to intensify where we had laid down the dark sepia. And then we're going to also be doing the head of the ladybug. But we want to make sure we leave that little white spot, which is where the eye is. Just going to kind of draw around that area so I don't accidentally put color where I don't want it. We can go back in with a little bit of white just to kind of brighten that up as well. And we'll do the same where that little bit of reflection on the back of the ladybug is. We'll just add some white right there. And that just helps to give it a little bit of that. Excuse me, hang on one sec. Nothing worse than getting a tickle when you're trying to talk. Okay, so that gives us the back of the ladybug. Now we want to look at where the antenna and the leg go. And these are going to be really quick little movements of your pencil, and you want your pencil to be really sharp. You'll see compared to the white, my pencil is very sharp. So we're just going to do very quick little gentle lines. The ladybug's legs, paying attention to kind of how they're shaped. One little tiny leg poking out there, and another one over here. The ladybug's not quite as rounded as I might like it, so I'm going to add a little bit more red on this side just to kind of round it, make it a little a little chunkier. That's what we call our one dog. She's a little bit heavier than she should be according to the vet. And we call her chunky. She's a chunky girl. There. Yeah, I like that ladybug now. It's nice and chubby. Okay, so as I had said before, we're actually going to do it this time. We're going to go into doing the background. And you'll notice in the reference photo that you can actually see the hints of what's in the background, and it's just out of focus. So we're going to try to replicate that to some degree. I mean, we don't have to do it exactly, but just give it the idea of that. So we're going to just lay some color down. We can do bigger circles. So there's a bit of white there. There's a bit of white down here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white in those locations.
So before you get too much into the background, I'm just curious, like with the ladybug, if you made a mistake, like I like how you added to make her just a little bit more plump, but what if you made her way too plump and you wanted to take some of that away? How would you go about doing that?
You can do that with the kneadable eraser. It may not take all of the pigment away, but it would certainly reduce it down. You can also actually show you guys. So I've got two other tools that I use. This is a slice tool. And so if you wanted more of a contrast and a little bit more of a light reflection and you put too much red there, you can just take this little slice tool and almost scratch very gently off that little bit of pigment right there. So that might be a way of skinning up the ladybug. Another
And is that slice tool, is it an X-Acto knife or is it different than an X-Acto knife?
It's different than an X-Acto knife. This is a Teflon blade.
Oh.
So it doesn't actually cut anything. It's almost like it just removes it with a fine point. You can actually, if you pressed hard enough, you could probably cut through lighter paper. You wouldn't be able to necessarily cut through pastel mat, but you can certainly cut through like a finer paper. So you want to use it just on the edge like this, and just very gently scratch the surface. So that's one way of doing it. And then the other thing that I have is this is a mono tombow eraser, and this one is a 0 size, and they come in different sizes. So you can see the difference between these two tips, how big one is compared to the other.
Wow.
And then there's also another tombow eraser that this one is more of a rectangle. It's got a bit of dirt there, but from pigment I picked up. So you could use one of these. So let's say right here, I want a bit more of that reflection. So you can pull off a bit of the pigment with one of those erasers. This one is really great because it's so tiny, it can just get in there. So like that.
Lovely. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Oh, my pleasure. So we're just going to again add a bit more white here and there, just a couple of areas of the background. And we're not worried about like copying this photograph exactly. I just want to give some interesting sort of textures behind the flowers, partly to start to give some contrast. So we actually are going to be able to distinguish between the flower and which is grays and whites, to the the actual background, it'll give that little bit of contrast, so we can actually distinguish all the different elements a little bit more. So I'm just kind of giving a bit of pigment down in all of the areas where I'm seeing some color. And like I said, I'm not worrying about coloring exactly the way that the the photograph reference photo is. I'm just kind of doing it where I want to provide a bit more contrast and interest. And then I'm going to show you another little magical tool that when I discovered it was like, this is life-changing. This is such a cool way of working with pencil crayons. And I didn't know you could even do it. So I'm still learning, and my philosophy is that life is I can't talk. Life is a lifelong learning process. We never, well, if we stop learning, I think we might be dead. So that's how I look at it. It's like, I'm always going to be learning new things about my materials, about what I can or can't do with something. And that's really exciting.
I love that. Life should be a learning process. Allie has a question real quick, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute her.
Sure.
Are we supposed to fill up the entire background of this 4x6 paper, or kind of like fade it out?
You can do whichever you prefer. If you
Okay.
are liking what you're seeing and you want to stop, it's your call. It's your
Oh, I just started. I'm just not sure I'm able to fill the entire background.
Yeah, no, you do whatever you can do. Whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't feel you have to do all of it. If you want to, go for it. If you don't worry about it. No pressure. So I'm just going kind of hither and yon with the colors. And then I also want to dark sepia. I'm going to put in some dark sepia kind of between the stems and the background. Again, because I want to provide that contrast from the background to the flowers so that the white starts to pop out more. Now this is where I'm going to introduce the new tool. Get really excited because this is a really expensive tool to use. Ready? Cotton bud.
We're holding, oh, very exciting.
Now you can also use a makeup brush. You don't have to use expensive tools when you're doing this type of work, but I really like a cotton bud. So what the cotton bud does is it just helps the pigment to get settled into the paper, and it blends it out really lovely. So you don't have to lay down quite as much pigment, and you get this really cool effect of it being soft. So this is really great for doing backgrounds to give you that real strong contrast and yet have it not be like glaring in your face. But see, now all of a sudden we can start to see the petals from the snowdrop popping out, where they almost were invisible before, and probably even more so with the camera. It probably wasn't showing all that strongly of a contrast. So now we have the opportunity to really create that contrast using a little bit of pigment and a whole lot more of the magic cheap tool that I love.
So what about the with charcoals? I know, right? Like I smudge with my finger. Can you do that with pencil crowns?
You can, although what I find happens if I use my fingers is I'll start to get a transfer of the pigment onto my hands, and then I can end up making a real mess.
Okay.
And so even with charcoal, I actually use a makeup brush or the cotton swab now more so than I do my fingers. I used to do my fingers a lot, but I find I can get way better control with using a cotton bud or a makeup brush. So I've just added a bit of red into this background now as well. And partly because what I want to do is provide like a little bit of a link between the color that's on the ladybug and just kind of help to sort of tie everything together. So I'm going to add some of the red color down here. I want to go right up to the ladybug because I don't want the ladybug to blend into the background. So I've just gone near it.
So the color in between the ladybug and the red is it green?
It is, yeah. I'm going to actually add a bit more green underneath the ladybug because I don't want to, like I say, have it blend in. And the nice thing with this type of blurry background is you can really just play with how you're laying down your color. And if you don't like it, you just add a bit more color. See, when I'm swirling the Q-tip around, I'm doing a circular motion as well. And I find that just helps to sort of blend everything nicely, and it takes away, like if I've left kind of almost lines, it helps to take those away a little bit more. And then if you're finding it still looking a bit too grainy, you can go back in with more color, more pigment, and that will help take that away as well. So that's the thing with backgrounds, is it can take multiple layers, and then you blend, and then you layer again, and then you blend, and you keep working it until you get the effect that you want.
And I love the different layers of colors. I think a lot of times people think of layers of colors and they might think of paint and not necessarily pencil crowns. But it's amazing what you can do with the pencil crowns and layering.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like is that it's a technique that not a lot of people would think to use with pencil crayons. And so when I discovered it, it was like, it's funny when we discover something that really inspires us with artwork. It's like you almost don't want to go to sleep because you're thinking, oh, I could do this with that technique, or at least that's how I am anyway. I don't know every way, but I get really excited and I start to go, oh, I can hardly wait to try it with this. I'm just putting a little bit of dark sepia around. I'm not like, I don't want to outline it, the petal, but I want to give a bit more contrast still. So I'm just adding a little bit of the dark sepia kind of in areas where I feel there needs to be a greater contrast from the background. And I'll blend that out.
So this color sepia, is it closer to a muted black or is it closer to a muted brown? How would you describe it if you don't have sepia in your color scheme?
Yeah, I would call it more of a muted browny gray color is the best way I can think to describe it. It's you can see it here. So here's the dark sepia. Get it black. And there's the black. See, you can see it's pretty darn close to the black, or it looks pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to put it next to a brown, so I'm going to put the brown on the other side of the dark sepia. So it's not quite a brown either. So this is the black, this is the dark sepia, and this is a brown. And you can see that it's almost like it's an in-between between the black and the brown.
That's really helpful to see them right next to each other.
Yeah, I thought maybe that would make a difference. So I put the dark sepia down when I'm still using it. Like I say, got another handful of pencils again. And sometimes when I'm using the cotton bud, there will be a little bit of pigment left on it. And where I don't want to necessarily add more pigment, I want to keep like just a real light effect. I can use that little bit of pigment on there and help sort of introduce pigment where there isn't any laid down yet. I just want to go back to the other drawing that I showed you before. So I'd started this background, but you can see how different this one is from this one. They each look completely different. And that's what I find exciting. I can do the same drawing 15 times and it'll look different for each of those 15 times. It's not ever going to look exactly the same. And that's the thing I enjoy about art, is it really allows you to go, looks different. That's good. I like that. You know, it doesn't have to look the same each time. So again, I'm just filling in some pigment in that circular motion, giving a bit more of a contrast from the background to the flower. Stephanie, I just want to check in. How are we doing for time?
We're at almost an hour and a half at this point.
Okay. I think we're on track. Okay, so I've got basically the whole background except for down in this area. I just want to add a little bit more of the red. Now I'm going to go in with the cotton bud and just blend all of those areas. And I'm pretty aggressive with using the cotton bud, but I'm also very careful about where I'm going with it. I'm not just kind of randomly going everywhere and scribbling. I'm being very careful to not touch on other areas that I don't want to be blended out. So specifically, I don't want to hit the flowers. I want to just go around the petal very carefully. and blend that color.
And so if you accidentally blend into your picture, is that when you take your eraser tools and kind of add a highlight through there? Or?
Exactly, yeah. I just dropped that cotton bud, that will stay on the floor. I'll get it later. So, and again, if the background is not looking terribly smooth, you just add more pigment because it needs enough pigment to pull around to you know give a smoother texture. If you don't have enough pigment, that's when you get the lines and the greeniness showing through, because there isn't enough pigment to really pull it into all of the little grooves. So with the background, I find that I can just keep layering and layering, and then eventually the paper will stop accepting pigment. The green will all fill up, and that's when you have to stop. But I find with pastel mat, I can probably put in sometimes up to 10 layers before it stops accepting pigment. Other surfaces, the papers and things, they may not accept as many layers, and so you have to know what your surface is going to allow you to do, and the only way you learn that is by trying it out, seeing how it works, and just being a little bit adventurous with it. Really, it's just okay, well, it's not like a priceless piece of artwork that you're going to ruin. It's going to be something fun for you to learn from and experiment with, and that's the important thing. It's not about creating a masterpiece. It'll be a masterpiece, but it doesn't have to be perfect or have a certain result. It all is up for your interpretation, and as long as you're having a good time with it, that's the main thing.
I love
So-
this idea that each new piece is a learning experience. I think that helps take some of the stress and anxiety out of it. That one can feel as they're going into a new adventure of a new piece. I find
Yeah.
sometimes that when I draw what I think it is going to look like, it kind of takes a mind of its own a little bit. And that's
Yep.
kind of fun to see in the end where it goes.
Exactly, and I think that actually is what's the best thing about art, is you don't necessarily always know what the outcome's going to be, and that's great. It really. So I'm gonna try something. I haven't done it with any of my other samples, but I want to use this bigger eraser, and I'm gonna just put in a couple of lines as if there was like some leaves coming through here, and that just gives another different texture. You know what I mean? And like you really can play and do whatever you want. So I was just thinking it'd be kind of cool to almost have some like almost raindrop effects coming here and there. So if I just do like a little circle area, it almost looks like it's raining in little spots. So that's kind of cool. And then I am thinking, now that I've got that there, it'd be nice to add a little bit of contrast underneath of it. So I'm going to add a bit more green and a little bit of the red. And this is where you can completely deviate away from your reference photo and do your own thing. And just keep playing with it. So I'm going to leave that there for now because I'd like to give you guys lots of time for asking questions or anything you'd like to talk about in terms of art. And and then you can keep working on your piece as well. But it'll give you a chance to ask me questions or talk about things you'd like to talk about, whatever that might be.
Yeah, there was a great question that came in about the background. Why do you do the background last and not sketch the flower and ladybug, and then draw the background?
Yeah, so it depending on what the image is, sometimes I'll do the background first and then do the main image later. The reason I did it this way, where I did the background last, is because the flower, the snowdrop, was so white. I didn't want to risk muddying the areas that needed to be white with the other colors. So I wanted to leave that until the background until the very end because of that. But if, for instance, I had a I was trying to think if I had something nearby to show you an example. If I wanted to do just trying to think of a good way to explain this. If it was, say, a dog and the fur was really like lots of golden red tones, then I would do that first and then do the background afterwards. But if it was like it really, each picture is so different, like, and I'll change up the approach depending on my interest. Like sometimes I'll work from the left side because I'm right-handed. I'll work from the left side of a portrait and go all the way to the right side and do each thing, whatever that might be, like so a section of the background, and then I'll work into the actual image, like if it's a dog or whatever, I'll work into that. So it really depends on what I'm feeling like that day as to how I approach it. And then it depends on how much white is in something, because like I said, I worry about muddying up the white with other colors. So it can be a bit variable. It's a hard question to answer because
You did a great job. You did a great job. It's an important question to ask, and I think
totally.
Artists have their own styles and variability, and I think you kind of captured that too, that it's not like a one size fits all, that you have to always like start with the foreground and then move to the background. Sometimes that switches up.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, your mood will be, well, I don't feel like working on the subject. I want to work on the background because it's easier. So yeah, that's what I find for me, is partly why I would choose to work on a certain area, is because I just don't have the energy at that point to get into something really detailed. And if the background is a little bit blurred out, I don't have to be as cautious and intricate. So that can be part of it as well.
Are there any other questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself or ask them in the chat. These are great questions you guys have had today.
Definitely. Yeah, I love answering questions.
Well, while we're waiting, I don't know if anybody is interested in showing their drawing on the recording or not. Oh, I see one. That is beautiful. I don't know. Let me see if I can spotlight that. Hold on one second. I'm gonna add a spotlight. That is absolutely beautiful, Nylene. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly, but that is absolutely beautiful.
Well done.
Did you have fun?
I definitely had fun.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I mean, I think the best part was having two things to draw because it was the flower itself, but then you had the background as well, which you don't think about because all
Yeah.
you think about is the flower.
That's
And
true.
so just knowing that you draw the background as well kind of makes you feel like, hey, that's something I never noticed, and now I'll notice it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you for this wonderful class. Had fun.
Thanks
My-
for joining us. You're an amazing artist. I truly hope that you'll stick with it.
Thanks. Speaking of amazing artists, yours looks great. Different from the other ones you've done, but looks amazing.
Yeah, that's what I really like about artwork is no matter, how many times you do something, each time it's going to be different. It's just the nature of artwork. Because one thing that I find influences my artwork from day to day is my mood. If I'm really feeling distracted or worried about something, I find I get into this headspace where all of that just disappears, and so sometimes that mood will actually show in my work whether I realize it or not, because it's like if I'm stressed and my work tends to be a little tighter, if you know what I mean by that. It's like you're doing a lot more detail and a lot more little niggly sort of things. Whereas when you're feeling happy, I find I tend to work a bit looser and a little bit more variety of things that I do. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but anyway, it's quite fun. I just realized there's a couple of things I want to show you that I have behind me.
Oh, April is showing us her picture. I'm going to spotlight her real quick so you can see it. So April, do you want to talk a little bit about your process?
Oh, interesting.
Unmute. My process.
Well, from the
was
standpoint of like in the chat, April shared, she didn't have
I was
colored
very
pencils.
late. I was very late. I had a hypoglycemic attack. I had no pencils, so I'm using acrylics. So my process was just dive in and go for it. I don't have any graphic paper, so I just had to use a pencil and make it. And then I had to stop because my neck was bothering me too much. Just I had it down on the table at first, like flat, and my neck was hurting. So I tried to put it on this, but then my neck and my shoulder are like, okay, you're done. So that's as far as I got today, but that's okay. I can finish it later.
That's quite all right.
But it's super fun.
It's
Super fun.
great.
Thank you.
You went with a totally different medium and had fun with that. I love it.
Yeah, I found this like old white gray paint I was using for the flower, and I like how it was like coming out kind of chunky and textured. I'm like, huh,
Yeah.
that's cool. And then I'll go back over it later with like a brighter white.
Yeah,
So yeah, unfortunately I gotta stop because of body limitations, but that's what I got. It's fun.
I find some days I can work for hours and other days I can only do 10 minutes. And nothing wrong with that.
Yep. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Stephanie, would you mind spotlighting me again?
Yep, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a drawing that I did. And so it's a little red squirrel. I did the squirrel first and the tree, and then I did in the background. But I didn't put in the details like the whiskers until after the background was done. So some elements you're going to, you're going to add in on top of your background. Some you're like, I added more hair after the background was in, so that it can really vary. You can do it in various stages. And then this one is something again that I did the butterfly first, then I did the hazy background, and then I added all the details of the hydrangeas and the leaves on top of that. So it was like I say, each time I do something, I'll change up my method a little bit, and I'll do things that maybe I haven't done before, or I changed up a little bit. And then this is, I do sometimes when I want to just do something that's kind of a little bit changed, or sorry, I'm losing my energy too, so I start to babble. So what I'll do if I don't want to do a big piece, sometimes I'll just do a little study. So this is a study of a dog's eye, and it just, you know, allowed me to try out some things and then not feel invested about that this had to be a final product. It was just meant to be a study, just to try some color blending, some, you know, see how I can get the textures in the fur that I want, and different methods of doing that. So don't ever think that you need to go and do like some huge, massive, big work of art. You can just, you know, concentrate on one little area of something and really learn from that. The other thing I do, just grabbing them all here. So if I'm getting myself organized to do a large portrait, I'll sometimes take each element and do a little sample drawing of, oh, this is what this eye could look like. I'm going to experiment with the colors and see if I get the right color for the eye using the things that I think. And so it's just really, and I'll write down little recipes of what I've used for each thing. And so like same with fur, you know, how do I get different fur textures and what methods are going to work? And so, you know, if you don't feel like doing a big drawing, just practicing like that is really good. So here's, you know, I tried different colorations like the tiger fur, the horse muzzle, dog nose, a couple of different ears, curly fur versus straight fur. So the more you practice, the better you're going to be, and then you'll know, like, okay, what colors are going to give me the effect that I want when I want to pull something together in a portrait. So don't ever be afraid to just take half an hour, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it might be for you, and do a little drawing to try out what something might look like. Don't feel you have to create the whole drawing. You can just take a little tiny piece of it and do it.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really helpful to hear from an established artist, you know, because sometimes it's easy to get down on ourselves as artists, like, okay, if I can't do the whole thing, or if maybe I don't have enough energy, but the fact that of practicing, you know, practicing the different types of furs, you know, that is something, because, you know, as an artist, it's nice to be able to practice as often as possible. And sometimes it might be that that day is we only have like 15 minutes of energy to like dedicate to art, but practicing that little patch of fur can be useful another day down the line. So
And something else I like to practice too is just doing quick little line drawings, you know, freehand line drawing. So I'll see, you know, maybe it's an image on my computer screen, and you know, when you get the rotating photos that come up, and I'll just, for the fun of it, I'll just sit there and I'll just quickly draw what I see on my computer screen. And because it flips over to another image, I know I have to be quick. So I can't get super detailed. I just have to capture the image. Or if I go outside and do that, something like that, where I know I only have a few moments to capture something. So it's a great exercise in allowing you to draw freely and not be like, oh, this has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. And so it's just, you know, allowing yourself the grace, if you will, of just having fun and not taking it too seriously.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And I hope that you guys had as much fun as I know that we did. And we look forward to seeing everybody again next time because we'll be doing this again. So keep an eye out for an email about MitoArtisan's Playtime. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
And if anybody would like to be the host, to be the presenter, we're looking for people who would like to do that, to join in, because it doesn't have to be about me in any way, shape, or form. It's going to be the whole Mito community that wants to be involved with this.
Absolutely. So if that's something that you're interested in, because this is being recorded, I'm just gonna put my email address out there. Feel free to contact me at sharry, HARRY, @mitoaction.org, and we'll make sure that you get connected. All right.
Thank you for all the fun, and hope we're able to do this again.
That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was fun, easy to understand, and thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you for your sacrifice, everyone. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Have a great